Hey, folks, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. I'm Tim, and this is Kimberly, and we're talking about love.
We're talking about love, making love.
Well, no, we're not talking about
how
making
to
love.
make your love great.
Okay, let's go with that. The first one, I don't think so. That's a different podcast.
That's another series. We probably should do that
no,
too.
No, I don't think so.
But yes, it's an important topic, but we won't be bringing any visuals is what we're here to say.
I don't think that is appropriate. So we this is our fifth podcast on this. And this is our final.
Fifth and final. Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about love from a biblical perspective. So there's a lot of definitions for love, and then there's some things love is not. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking about that in a practical way, how it affects your relationships, marriage, everything, whether you're raising children or whatever. Mm-hmm. So in this process, of studying this, we came up with four biblical definitions for love. The first one is romance, the kind of love that is romantic. You don't feel that for everybody. If you do, you got a problem. Yeah, it gets really creepy. I had a romantic relationship with this guy, but he didn't know anything about it, she said.
Stalker.
So, but a romantic is this reciprocal emotional connection. And then secondly is familial love, the kind of love that you have for family. And the third is love and friendship, the friendship that you might have with somebody that's reciprocal. And then the fourth one, and is foundational of all other love, and that is unconditional love. That is a kind of love that is foundation. It's all forms of love should have that existing, or it may be devoid of real love. So it's an important thing. And we've been taking this out of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. So let's read it.
Chapter 13:4. And today we're covering verse 7, the last verse in this. Let me start with love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. And here we go for today. Love bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things, and it endures all things. So it bears, believes, hopes, and endures.
And here's the important thing about that is that this is a really high standard.
Such a high bar.
This is not something you can't do in your own ability. You actually have to turn to God. Mm-hmm. You can do it, but you have to turn to God.
With God's help. Yep.
Yeah, with God's help.
So
you work together
point.
with Him. Mm-hmm. But let's kind of break it down. First one is bears all things. And the idea of bearing something in this original language, it literally means to cover or protect. It doesn't mean that you go, I can handle anything you give me. What it means is very specific, it's very targeted. It's the Greek word stego, which means to cover or protect by covering. So you seek to make the offense private, not that you privatize it in an unhealthy way.
Like secrecy-wise.
So, because here's the issue of dealing with somebody that's involved in something that's sinful, for example. When you see them doing bad behavior, the tendency of the flesh is to go talk to somebody else instead of them.
That's true.
The biblical concept of love says you go to them directly. Mm-hmm. And you keep that private unless they forfeit their right to privacy because their sin is unchecked. Mm-hmm. But what you do is you avoid shame that way. You see, every human being can't deal with shame. Mm-hmm. So think about, how you deal with people you love. Mm-hmm. Are you trying to shame them?
Right.
Or are you trying to cover? Now, when you cover, it's not for the purpose of protecting them so they could continue to sin. Mm-hmm. It's protecting them from the shame, which usually will drive them back into sin.
I'm just thinking in terms of being a parent, we often talk about how we were raised. Yeah. I think every generation gathers the things that worked and that were effective and life-giving, you try to hang on to those things, and every generation looks back and says, I won't do that way to my kids,
Right.
because it didn't bring about the right result. And it's been beautiful, even in my own experience in raising together. We have 7 children and now 9 grandkids, so I get a view into what I did and possibly did wrong, and how my kids have gathered some of those things that I did right, but also are implementing even better tools.
Yeah.
And it's been
They are better parents.
very illuminating, because I think in terms of what you were talking about with shame, how I was raised, and I think you too, we had dads who called us out in public, like they were both pastors, and they would speak to us from the pulpit.
Yeah, that's right.
And in front of sometimes hundreds of people, when they saw us being kids, sitting through church and, being too squirrely, or sometimes climbing under the pews.
Or playing marbles.
Yeah.
I played marbles
I mean,
on my
but
brother's coat.
yeah, but I remember in that generation, my mom really wasn't a spanker. So it was always my dad, who had a very quick-tempered personality. But he would just grab us and smack us in public anywhere when we did something where we stepped out of line. Not an effective way to bring the right outcome, because immediately you feel shame. You're carrying it not just for yourself, but all these strangers who are also incredibly uncomfortable with what they've just seen are having to enter into that
Right.
shame.
That's a private thing.
It's a private thing. So, again, my parents did the best with what they had. And I think my brothers and I turned out all right with God's grace. I did things too as a parent that I look back and say, why did I allow this to happen on my clock? Why did I do this in this way? We're constantly having to surrender our own failures in this process. But the goal is to not create a place of shame. I think our human hearts can handle guilt. That's actually healthy, because it points us to correct behavior. But we're not in a place to be able to handle shame psychologically.
Shame destroys us.
It destroys
really
us.
does.
Yeah. And guilt says, you know what? I did something wrong. Shame says, I am what's wrong. And that's not healthy.
Yeah.
So I think, it's really important for us to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So when you even when somebody does something publicly, I think it's important to privately deal with them, even if they eventually need to publicly apologize. But it's best to do that privately. Some people don't have the strength to deal with people in private, but that's no excuse. You've got to do it. Parents, make sure you pull your children to the side. Everybody knows what's going on, but you just deal with them privately.
Yeah.
I love how 1 Peter chapter 4 says about, dealing with this matter of covering sins. He says, the end of all things is at hand. So it's the apocalypse. It's ready to come down. And he said, be sober-minded, pray, be self-controlled. But he said, above all this, in verse 8 of 1 Peter 4, he says, above all, when you are facing the end of all things, keep loving one another earnestly, and since love covers a multitude of sins. So covering a multitude of sins there's a sense that it conceals, but it's not to conceal so that there's no accountability.
That's good.
And so you hold person accountability privately. If I have a problem with my wife and I go and talk to, Joe Blow about it, I'm not dealing with my wife. I'm just dealing with my emotions. What I need to do is check my emotions, check my motives, and then expose what I'm feeling, and do it properly, do it with respect, and it's not this destructive thing. So when he says bear all things, he's really talking about covering that sin, keeping things private. That's what love does. And then what's the next thing it does?
And the next says believes all things. So you basically put yourself in the position of believing the best in others. Now, this is easier for some than others, because I think, depending on how you're wired, your personality type, your temperament type, we can just lean into more of, believing the best if you lean really positive, and if you tend to be more analytical, you would struggle with believing the best in others. But this doesn't give a caveat for how your personality. This says regardless of how you're wired, you need to choose to believe the best in others first. Yeah. It's a really good default.
Yeah, when you think of believing all things, you think about, our belief in Christ. That's really important. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about our love relationships, mm-hmm. human to human, what you're talking about is you believe the best in others.
Right.
And people who love well always assume the best mm-hmm. about people's motives. Mm-hmm. Don't assume the worst about their motives. You don't know their motives.
Right.
And then judge their actions fairly or justly, yes. appropriately. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you're not jumping to conclusion about why they did it. Mm-hmm. You look at what they did, and if it's bad behavior, mm-hmm. That you judge that fairly.
Yeah.
If it's behavior that you don't understand, mm-hmm. ask questions.
Yeah.
So
that it's a balancing act, because you're called to believe the best in others, but at the same time, what I hear you saying, and this is really important, is when they walk out the bad behavior and bad choices, I always say it like this: believe them.
Yeah.
They're revealing their heart.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Don't take that positive believing the best and try to apply it to what's been exposed as openly, overt, willful, bad behavior, because that actually is enabling to someone who is doing the wrong things. So again, though, it calls you to believe the best, because what you're doing is creating safety for that person to be able to expose who they really are. But when they expose the bad behavior, then I say believe them.
Yeah, this is like that book that you've shared with women who are going through a breakup or whatever. They just don't feel like they're getting the appropriate attention. He's just not that into you.
Right.
And you go, if his actions show that he's not loving you, mm-hmm. he's just not that into you.
Just believe it.
Believe it. Uh-huh. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
And then the next one is, not only does it
believe all, it hopes all.
It bears all, it believes all, and then it hopes all.
Yep. It hopes for things. So hope is powerful.
Yeah.
Because
despair, if you don't have hope, you have despair.
You're hoping for the best outcome for others, and hope is powerful. Hope is what carries us. It tethers us through the storms of life, and your circumstances, can feel untenable, difficult, unmanageable. Mm. But when you're anchored in hope for the future, and when that hope is anchored in Christ, this is what's key, again, is you can't put your hanger of hope on someone, because at some point our flesh nature will fail another person. Mm. But when your hope is in Jesus, and that person has a relationship with Jesus or wants to do the right thing, then your hope is well placed.
Yeah. When we think about, we had talked about last time about competitiveness. Mm-hmm. When you hope for all things in the confines of your human to human relationship, not to God, mm-hmm. but when you hope in others, what you're hoping for is you're hoping they win. Mm-hmm. That's people who love well hope that other people will win. They will do well. Mm-hmm. It's not a competition, folks.
Right.
There's a lot. And then he says, and this is the final one, endures all things. Yeah. And that's an interesting Greek word. It's one of my favorite Greek words because it's so descriptive. Hupomeno. Hupo means under, and meno means to abide. The idea of abiding, that you're just relaxed, mm-hmm. and you're abiding under. Mm-hmm. And you have this ability to hang in there, mm-hmm. when there's adversity. Mm-hmm. And there's ways to define that. But mm-hmm. when you look at yourself, you go, am I willing to hang in there? Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about hanging in there with abuse.
No.
That's not what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about when things get rough. Mm-hmm. Let's say that your spouse goes through a health problem, mm-hmm. that is very difficult, and mm-hmm. it's stressful on mm-hmm. both of you. Mm-hmm. That ability to hang in there.
Well, you lose your finances overnight,
right. You just hang in there.
It's about stamina. It's about having stamina for yourself and stamina for the people you love. It's the ability to kind of withstand the fatigue and the deprivation that happens in those times, and just to keep working, hanging on to that hope, when you think you can't go on. It's that love, that unconditional love, that just keeps pushing you forward day by day. I think about, all of us at some point women and dads that are young parents of young children, the stamina that requires as a mama. You're exhausted, a single dad, you're drained, you feel like you have no more strength, but that love drives you to continue when you think you can't anymore. You get up in the middle of the night the third time in a row. When you feel like you can hardly stand on your feet, you're doing it because of that love, that commitment that tethers you to that child. And that's the kind of love Jesus is talking about.
Yeah, when I walked into your life, you were a single mom of 5 kids. And I'm like shaking my head, like, how are you doing this? And other people are shaking their head at me, like, why are you getting involved?
And I'm like, thank God.
But the reality was, it was a joy together. It was very difficult. You're managing a lot of things financially, domestically. Just I did just the laundry itself was completely
voluminous.
overwhelming. And but so there, when we talk about enduring all things, that hupomeno, that abiding under, is first stamina and then tolerance. And the tolerance is when, let's say, your child is going through bad behavior and it's pushing your limits, but you stay in there, keep calling them to righteous living and appropriate behavior. Or maybe you're tolerating somebody's weakness. We've been watching this show, Balin Out Loud.
Oh, yeah.
And she's a young 21-year-old, and they have, I think, six kids, this couple. Really a good family.
Reality show, yeah.
Yeah, it's a reality show. But she has Tourette's syndrome, and they're Christians. And she has the kind that only about 10% of people with Tourette's syndrome have, and that's where she yells out vulgarities. and it's just really, hard on the family, but they've learned to roll with it. They've learned to abide under. They tolerate it. And it's amazing to watch them deal with her and deal with their own, because they love her.
Yeah.
And that's what love does.
It does.
It stretches.
And that's kind of our conclusion with this whole series, is that love creates a place of safety. It's a home of safety. That's the kind of love we're called to, is to be able to create a place not of blindness to bad behavior or ignoring or excusing bad behavior, but it creates a place of safety to even fail. And to fail forward. So that is the key, really, in all of this, is just that we have the responsibility and the ability to create home as a space of love. So
that's creating that safety is essential. And if you're creating a place that's unsafe, you're creating fear, and it's diminishing love and intimacy, as we said last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. But the reality is that every one of us has a responsibility for the people we love. If we truly love them, we're going to create safety for them. And sometimes when you're well-meaning, you'll mess that up.
Yep.
You're going to do it. You just have to apologize. And I'll give you an illustration, something I'm not proud of, but it is part of being human. One of our adult daughters was having a tough time, and she's going through a difficult time, and she's just feeling it. And when all of this began in her life, she needed to spend time with us and hadn't yet. Spent some time with Kimberly. Kimberly was able to see her and spend some time, but I hadn't, and it was the first time. And I remember just putting my arms out, and she just kind of melted into my arms. And she was sobbing, and I had my arms around her, and I whispered in her ear, "You're home, you're safe." And she just cried all the more. And it was really a tender moment. And we had good discussion. And then that night, it was getting a little bit later. It wasn't late at night. Late for night for us is 8:39. But anyway, it was getting a little later, and we started a discussion, and in that discussion, I brought up some things that were my opinion, and I was presenting that opinion really strongly, and it's not something that she wanted to do, and it pushed her away. And what I thought was a safe place to speak that truth, she wasn't ready to hear that. She just wanted to be comforted in that moment. Sometimes we get, too far down the road.
Right.
We're not ready to speak to that issue. You've got to wait. You got to be patient. You've got to be ready when it's time to speak and ready to tolerate the resistance to that in your own heart, just resist that need to speak your heart. And it was not good.
And I will just say, knowing you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're wired for love, protection, and we always call you our fixer. So your love language is to come in with after the hugs and the tears, because you're very tenderhearted, especially for your daughters. And you want to give the right encouragement and advice for the next right steps. So that's all part of your love language.
Yeah.
It just felt for her like, I think, more task driven, and she just needed to be present with you.
Yeah. It was too early. It
Yeah.
was too,
Yeah.
and that's when you love well, you hear the heart of the person you love.
Yeah.
And if you don't and you mess it up, it's okay.
Yep.
What you do is you do what I did. I came to her and I apologized. And I really felt like I had gone too far. And my fear of her making a mistake caused me to make the mistake in pushing her to do something she was not ready to do. So just in conclusion, that is how we see love. We hope this series is one that's going to encourage love and growth in your life. If you missed one of these episodes, or any of the episodes that we teach, we've been, this is number 245, episode 245. So you can listen to any of those. There's great series on there that we've shared. We're looking at doing another series coming up very soon. And that series is going to be very possibly on end times, apocalypse. And we've
Let
had a
your
lot of
friends
people
know,
ask
yep.
questions about that. What can we expect? It does seem like the end of all things is coming, and there's certainly a lot of interest in that. Yeah. So we'll get back to you. That's not for sure, but I'm pretty sure.
It's coming at some point.
Yeah, it's coming at some point. Probably the next series coming up in the next couple of weeks. So God bless you. Have a great week. Listen to this series. Invite your friends to do so on love. This is Hope Rescue Podcast at hoperescuepodcast.org.
Bye, guys.